What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Coinist podcast, brought to you by Bybit Exchange. I am very excited to make this show a weekly occurrence again. We took a little bit of time off, but with Bitcoin making new 2019 all-time highs and the market awful excited about everything that's happening, it's only right that we start talking to all the fund managers and analysts on what they're thinking with this run-up, also looking at exchanges and getting some transparency if you actually are investing and trading on those exchanges. I think that's important. So I'm going to be asking the questions that you want heard, also the trends and conversations that you can't miss if you are investing in this space. Today's conversation is no different. I talked to Dovey Wan and Eric Meltzer of Primitive Ventures. They spend a lot of time in Asia, investing there, and also looking at the themes and trends happening in Asia. So you get some unique insights into what's happening there in terms of traders' perspective, different thoughts on projects that are maybe more popular there versus the U.S. We also look at regulatory concerns or some of the trends that are happening with U.S. users of exchanges getting blocked out and what that could mean for exchanges there in Asia. And then at the end, we also have some fun talking about Satoshis Treasure, which is a treasure hunt game. I think of it as kind of a Ready Player One with $1 million in Bitcoin up for grabs. That means even you right now listening and watching, could claim that $1 million. So it's a fun conversation. Talk to Eric, who's helped put the game together and create it. So hope you guys enjoy. I really did enjoy this episode. I've been waiting to kind of put it out. It's something that I'm genuinely interested in terms of what traders think in the US or what investors think here and what we might be missing in Asia and vice versa. So hopefully this fills in some gaps. And before we get into the show, I do have one quick message and shout out to my main sponsor for the show, Bybit Exchange. They are making this podcast possible. I appreciate you guys. If you're listening, watching, please do check them out at trading.bybit.com/venturecoinist. The link's down below on YouTube. If you're listening on any other device, you can also check out my Twitter or my website and see the link right there, or just head on over to Bybit. If you do use my link, you get a free $10, so you can check out the platform for free and get a little money to play around with. The other thing that's unique about Bybit and is pretty brutal with a lot of other exchanges is you can submit a support ticket or not understand how to use the exchange or have a problem. You might be waiting months, and Bybit is a 24/7 support team waiting to help you. They also have some contracts and products available there that you can't find anywhere else. Everyone's familiar with margin and leverage trading on Bitcoin and Ethereum, but Bybit offers it for XRP USD as well. I know there's a lot of XRP fans out there. Some people are diehard about it. So whether you love XRP and you love smashing the buy button, or if you hate it, you can long and short on Bybit. That's a pretty cool feature. I like it. They're trying out new features, new products that you can't find anywhere else. And then the last thing is, competition between exchanges is great. And when you have an exchange like Bybit that's stepping in and has no overload, that's huge for traders. You can get your order submitted, get that order through on time. And I love to see exchanges actually working on what traders want to see. So quick shout out to Bybit. Appreciate them and excited to bring you guys all the updates that are happening with their platform each week. Do check them out. The link is down below. Without further ado, let's get into the show. I'm going to roll it with Dovey Wan, Eric Meltzer. Hope you guys enjoy this one. I learned a ton. And if you enjoy listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, drop a thumbs up, comment, do whatever you have to, or just tweet at me. I don't care if you leave a review. I do enjoy hearing from you guys, though. Let me know what you think, and let's get to the show. Cheers. We should be live. Thank you guys a ton for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, should be a good one. This
Thank you
one's
for having us.
Of course. This is not a long time in the making, Dovey. I think I reached out to you slightly before Consensus. I wish we would have got to meet up at Consensus. Yep. That would have been fun, but this is fine. This will suffice. How are you guys? Where are you guys based right now? I know your team. Sometimes you're in Asia. Eric, I think you're back in the U.S. right now. What's that kind of look like? Where are you guys usually stationed?
Yeah, so I'm in Boston for a bit. My wife is doing a postdoc out here, so I'm out here for the time being.
Nice.
But I'm from San Francisco. I'm back in San Francisco a lot, and then I spend a lot of time in Beijing too, because I went to college there, and my previous fund was there, and I have a lot of friends out there. So I'm kind of bouncing between those three cities.
Yeah, so like for myself, and I spend my time 50-50 between San Francisco and like Asia. Whenever I'm in Asia, so I spent primarily time in Singapore, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. So I was born and raised in like Guangzhou, and so that's where like WeChat, Tencent, and then all these internet companies are, and then also it's pretty close to like Shenzhen as well. So it's only 1 hour, 2 hour drive from like Shenzhen to like Guangzhou, and Shenzhen is where all these hardware manufacturers are, and so a lot of my minor friends are there as well. So I'm currently in Shanghai, and Shanghai is known as the center for blockchain in China, and it's the headquarters for Quantum, for Ontology, for Neo, and a few other wallet app as well. So it's a pretty vibrant community here.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. That's one of the reasons I want to bring you on before we get into that theme of crypto in Asia versus crypto out here in the West, which I think is going to be good to dive into, especially given what's happening kind of recent regulatory wise and trade war wise. A lot of podcasts start with, asking how'd you first get into crypto? It's a played out question. What's probably more interesting, everyone that works in this space seems to kind of create time or slow down time. You guys are the co-founders of Primitive Ventures. You also created Satoshis Treasure, which we're going to dive into. And then Eric, you run Proof of Work, an incredible newsletter that everyone should check out. Did you guys meet in Asia and then start Primitive together? Were you guys both in crypto? Did you find crypto together? How did this synergy kind of happen? I think that's maybe a more interesting tale than how'd you get into crypto?
Yeah, and so actually I met Dovey multiple times, before we decided to really work together. And what ended up happening was, both of us have this thesis, or I guess maybe I should back up. So I think in general, crypto investing is a really weird space. And it's really different than other like sort of high risk investment in that if you're a VC, there's like a big risk to not investing at all. So if you're like a VC fund and you just don't invest in anything, you're just holding dollars. Yep. But if you're a crypto investor, you could just choose to just hold Bitcoin. And I think, the majority of crypto funds would be better off if they just did nothing but hold Bitcoin. Because most of the form, and I think, one of the ways that you can outperform Bitcoin, kind of one of the only ways in crypto, is if you get really, really early access to actually meaningful, like big projects. And that can either be because you believed in them before anyone else did. So like in the case of Bitcoin, it's not like Satoshi had a pre-sale. It's just, this thing looked like stupid to most people until the brain virus had infected them to a degree to which they were able to understand why it was cool. And so Dovey and I were both like really focused on these super early stage opportunities. And a lot of those come from sort of being really immersed in communities and kind of seeing what everyone's actually building. And as a result, like, if you're doing that, most of your deal flow is coming from entrepreneurs that you've previously backed rather than from other funds. And so Dovey and I were kind of hanging out with a lot of the same people, and we're also competing for a lot of the same deals. And I kept seeing, who's this girl who keeps like getting these big allocations? Stepping together on a lot of stuff. We incubated this project that I'm really excited about. I'm actually going to hang out with the founder in like 2 hours after this. The project's called Namebase. And the idea with Namebase is there's this really interesting project called Handshake, where they're building a sort of decentralized DNS system. And that's something that people in crypto have been trying to do forever. So like, Namecoin, as far as I know, was the first altcoin, or it was like the first meaningful altcoin. But Namecoin had a bunch of issues, including that like, if you want to actually use it to run DNS, you have to run a full node. And they didn't reserve enough names and this and that. And so Namecoin never really took off, although it's still around. And so when Dovey and I saw this Handshake project, we got super excited. And the first thing I thought was like, okay, if we want to accumulate more of this coin, because the way that they did the round was like they had 30 investors, I think maybe more than that. It was basically like every good VC you've ever heard of, plus like a bunch of kind of random like badass people in crypto. And so no one had a lot of allocation. There was kind of no way to get more. I literally like begged them. I was like, I'll do anything. Give me an extra 50K. And since then, I've been like begging for secondaries. It's been like totally pathetic. But we figured, one of the ways to get a bigger allocation would be to run an exchange. And I knew a little bit about that because the first fund that I was working on was with this Chinese guy, Li Xiaolai, who used to run a really big exchange in China called Yunbi. And whether you've heard of Yunbi or not is like this really good test for like how long people have been in crypto, because it was like a big deal back in the day, but then it totally disappeared when the Chinese government shut everything down. And so Yunbi was making like millions of dollars a day in profit. And so I kind of knew, if you run an exchange and the exchange gets actual volume, you'll be able to accumulate a lot of coin. And the secondary insight to that is that if you're running an exchange, you should probably hold a lot of that coin that you get in fees, and you shouldn't liquidate it to fiat. And that's kind of a controversial position. The reason I think that is that you've seen the really early exchanges that actually did that. Even today, even though in my opinion they're really not executing on the level of some of the new exchanges, they still have insane amounts of money just because they held Bitcoin for so long. And so anyway, so kind of on this thesis, Dovey and I we ran into this amazing team of kids who are a combination of MIT dropouts, MIT graduates, a bunch of self-taught coders, just really amazing people. And they came to us with this idea that I thought was kind of cool, but not a great idea. And so I told them hey, there's this thing called Handshake that no one knows about yet, because this is before it was announced. And you guys should just start building an exchange for it right now, because you'll be way ahead of the pack. And so they tried it out as a weekend project that ended up being really badass. And Dovey and I each invested in it from our funds. And then this experience of working with her closely on bringing this project up made me think man, we should, if I'm going to do a second fund after this first one, we should do something together. And we kind of went back and forth on that for a long time. We tried to establish a good timing for the fund, because we didn't want to launch it at the beginning of the last bull market, or towards the end of the last bull market. But yeah, that's kind of the origin stories. We were working together on so many things, it made sense to just work together more formally.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense, kind of a natural synergy. I think I read on your website as well with Primitive, it's not so much going along kind of the lines of that natural way it kind of came together. I think you guys aren't thesis focused. It's more like you said, you're just looking for kind of the natural opportunity of, if you like what a person's building, if you're hanging out with that person anyways, if you believe in that person, that's more what you're looking for, rather than having kind of a poetic medium thesis and trying to fit that narrative.
Yeah, so that stuff drives me nuts. And I think the reason it drives me nuts is kind of what's always attracted to me to investing, is that investing is one of the only fields where there's a very clear scoreboard, right? You win if you made more money than everyone else and the side constraint, of course, is in a non-shady way, right? So pump and dumps aside, if you're whoever wins in VC is whoever makes the most money. And what drives me crazy is these VCs seem to do all this stuff that really doesn't make money, and in fact hampers them from making money, in order to get more sort of VC thought leader points. And I have no VC thought leader points to me are a shitcoin. I have no interest in that. Our entire fund is established to make more Bitcoin. And so we're very anti-thesis. And when I read these theses from these VCs, it's very funny to me, because it's having been in the space for a while, I've seen sort of the narratives change over and over and over again.
Sure.
And there's this great quote there's this author that I love that I highly recommend to anyone in favor of reading more nonfiction. I think, reading fiction is actually really useful as an investor, because it helps you sort of think into the future. This is William Gibson. And he has this great quote that's the street finds its own use for things. And I think that's what we see in crypto is the street or the world finds its own use for these currencies. And they're not going to abide by sort of what some VC tells them these things are for. And so we've seen that with Bitcoin. We've seen that, with Ethereum. And I think we'll keep seeing that. And so having some people ask us this all the time, does Primitive invest in tokens? Does Primitive only invest in equity? And we're dude, we'll invest in anything that's a convincing, asset, and that has a reason. We have a reason to believe is going to appreciate. And that's something, Dovey and I are super aligned on.
Okay. Is there anything you guys are very, very different about in that regard? Is there, I know you don't kind of have a thesis you both stick with, but Dovey, is there something, or I guess, is there kind of a niche for you both, or an area which you kind of separate on?
Yeah, the other thing I want to clarify is, first of all, we are not a traditional VC fund, and because we have seen so many VCs before, and one thing about VC is, VC tends to be very regional, right? And then so you have seen pretty much all the VCs, so they're just so they're basically very centralized, in US and probably just on Sand Hill Road, and then Sequoia China and Sequoia US, so they always invest in very regional deals, right? And then so VC tends to have this regional unfair advantage, and then but when it comes to crypto as a new kind of asset, it's global from day one. And I have no idea and how a regional VC play can have a really good position here. And the other thing is, and I think crypto might be the first sector that US as as a sovereign state has no unfair advantage, because if you think about tech investment, right? So like Silicon Valley is pretty unique because it has the entire ecosystem out there, and it has all the way from Intel, Cisco as the infrastructure, and then all the way to application like Google and Facebook, and
Yep.
everything just magically happened in Valley, and because of Stanford, because of all these historical reasons. But I think right now when it comes to crypto, and US seems to have like disadvantage, as opposed to advantages. And like mining will definitely not like massively mining will definitely not like largely happen in like US because it's very, very expensive when it comes to operation, and just like all the mining from setup.
Yep.
And like electricity is then not that cheap as well. And then like trading not gonna happen in US there largely. And I think because of the taxation is one thing, and then like the other thing is all this regulatory constraint, right?
Sure.
And I think like what's remaining in US right now is probably really good like software developer, and so that's like the the human resource capital. But I have seen more and more team, and so they are either being fully decentralized, like just like Ethereum and like just like Monero, and then many of them are willing to just move out of like US.
Yep.
And I think like what's very unique about us is first of all, me and Eric, and I think like Eric is pretty different as well. And then he says he's San Francisco local, but like he can speak like insanely good Chinese. And like he's like a white Jewish, but like he's more Chinese than I think like he's more Chinese than myself, like in many aspects.
There's this joke in Mandarin that's like 天不怕地不怕只怕广东人说普通话. It's like people from Dovey's region speak like really messed up Mandarin.
Yeah.
They have like a really funny accent. And so the joke is like afraid of nothing in the sky, nothing on earth, just afraid of Cantonese people trying to speak Mandarin.
Yeah, so because like my Mandarin is actually not as good like when it comes to accent wise. So because like Eric has this like Beijing accent, so it's very standard accent when it comes to Mandarin. And so
Dovey's still teaching me slang. Chinese slang is like really rich. And there's like a bunch of really funny Chinese slang about crypto and about like trading and
I saw some of those. Dovey, you were tweeting some of those out about there's a phrase for like pump and dump or something similar, and then there's a phrase for this amount of hype and all the different things.
What's interesting about those is a lot of those phrases actually came from the Chinese stock market traders, because the Chinese domestic stock market is like super screwed up. It's highly manipulated. It's like 50% retail. It's not like
more than 50%,
more than 50%, 70% or something. And also you can't short. Like shorting is illegal.
Yeah.
It's illegal to short. And so it's just like totally messed up. And so a lot of these funny terms that apply to these really manipulated, altcoin markets come from that.
Yep. Oddly enough, in another market that's still very retail driven. One of the reasons that I wanted to have you guys on, it's good that we got to break down Primitive a little bit. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on, I read an article, Dovey, I think I reached out to you before Consensus, but I read an article from Arjun, another analyst in the community, and he was talking about, I think he was at Token 2049 Hong Kong event, and he was just explaining kind of the differences and highlighting the differences of the conference out there compared to a Consensus here, and people's optimism out there for tons of tokens still, and kind of the environment there. There's still like this ICO craze going on. I obviously want to get your guys' insights into crypto in the East versus crypto in the West. What do you think first, though, before we kind of dive into the regulatory that we talked about, that where trading will probably go, where teams and investors are looking? What's maybe the biggest misconception before we do look at this? Is crypto that different out west than it is out east, or what are you guys seeing?
I mean, I think one of the big differences is just how concentrated the mining community is in China, and that affects a lot of things. I mean, so it means the Chinese exchanges and OTC and it means, like a funny example is like, it's a little harder now, but like in the past, there were like Chinese miners that could actually, manipulate the price of Bitcoin enough to make money on shorting or longing Bitcoin and then dumping or buying from their own stocks, right?
When was that?
And like there's very few actors.
What time period was that?
Even during like the last sort of 3,000 to 4,000 band, there was a lot of that. because it's like if you're a giant miner and you know that there's a lot of sort of resistance up and below and above this band, you can just move the price, in between that band and just make a ton of money on leverage trading. And a lot of these miners were doing that. And I think, again, like that's getting harder, especially with Bitcoin, just because Bitcoin liquidity is so deep. That's getting harder and harder to do. But you see kind of crazy stuff like that happening. And then also just the network of OTC desks in China is so deep. And there's a huge story in China, much more so than in the US, because the Chinese government seizes people's money all the time. And they also make it very hard to move money overseas. And so I think they're like the understanding of sort of why Bitcoin is cool is deeper in China. And that's like without touching any of the stuff that you mentioned that Arjun brought up about like, maybe there's more enthusiasm for altcoins over Asia or IEOs. I think just sort of the base level understanding of why crypto is interesting is super high in Asia in general, but especially in China. Like I don't want to like Korea and Japan are totally different markets.
Yeah. The use case almost is highlighted more because of that. Dovey, go ahead.
Yeah, so like so I think like the other thing I would add is because especially in like China and like Korea as well, and like the entire payment system, just digital payment system is so advanced. And like so say for instance, if you live in China and you will never use cash, and so like you will rarely use credit card as well. Like everything is on WeChat Pay, Alipay.
Yeah. Like the cash thing has gotten to the point. So when I went back to China like 2 years ago, it's like everyone uses in WeChat, but you could use cash. And now it's like if you use cash, people are like what? Like they're like weirded out by it. I mean,
aren't there stores that don't accept cash? I was in Hong Kong, I think, for only like a week or a weekend.
You legally have to accept cash, but like, so your friends will make fun of you. Like it's like a bizarre thing. Like what are you, some kind of drug dealer? Like,
That's hilarious.
So like because I think like the whole monetary system has been highly digitized, and so and then like also like gaming. So if you basically see like the gaming market share and like just like China, US, also like China, Korea, and like Japan, and then so I think so the three together might be like over like 60% of the entire like digital gaming, just video gaming and like digital gaming market, right? And so a lot of this like virtual goods idea and just like virtual currency are like has been popularized before. It's like long before like all this like cryptocurrency thing. And so I think just like the mental resistance and just like being like a not like a total new concept when it comes to like cryptocurrency and like virtual currency, like actually that paved the entire path and for the adoption of like cryptocurrency. And people are so used to like digital wallet and so like versus like many I think many American users, so they're like heavily rely on like Coinbase as the bank like kind of equivalent. But like here all these are Chinese user and like Chinese crypto trader, and then so they're very familiar with like how to use non-custodial wallet and like things like that. So I think like that's a huge difference. So like that's like a difference of the entire different like fintech or just like payment infrastructure out there.
Cultural too, yeah. Understanding. I want to dive into a couple more kind of more focused topics on the nuances there. Eric, you touched on infrastructure being a lot more built out in terms of OTC desks, exchanges. You have, I think, OKX and who else was it that just announced a partnership today? Bitfinex. There's a lot of exchanges that are focused out there. What do you guys think is kind of, Binance, I think, is geofencing out the U.S. Oddly enough, China used to ban quote unquote crypto a lot. It almost seems like the U.S. is doing more to ban crypto or to keep people from trading crypto assets more than China is. How do you think that plays out? What's kind of the exchange scene there versus here? Is volume just going to continually go there? Is that a trend that doesn't stop, or does kind of what do you guys see happening?
I think it's really hard to predict what happens with volume long term. I think though that like the two things I have high conviction on are, the cat's not going back in the bag, and whether it means continuous sort of jurisdictional arbitrage where exchanges themselves move around or exchanges in new jurisdictions get hotter as a result of easier sort of legal frameworks, or whether it means people actually finally start moving to non-custodial and decentralized exchanges. But I don't think that's going away. The Chinese situation is really interesting because my sort of impression from having been in the trenches there, sort of when our exchange, when UMB got shut down,
Mm-hmm.
and then watching sort of what happened with Huobi and Binance and OK, is that like Chinese government really doesn't want to deal with this. Like it's not something that they, when the Chinese government really thinks something's a threat, they crack down on it super hard.
Yeah.
And they haven't really done that with crypto. It's more been like, all right, just like make this not our problem. Like, make sure
okay.
Chinese company, make sure that like you're basically blocking Chinese users. But like it's the reaction that we're seeing from the Chinese government. And again, this kind of delves deep into this sort of like trying to what's going on. But it really doesn't seem like this is something the Chinese government wants to eradicate. And then the other thing is that in the US, like the US seems to be the only country with like a really global regulatory apparatus where like the SEC, will come after foreigners if they're dealing with US people.
Yep.
And they have, less under Trump, but they have a pretty decent budget to do that. And so I think like, especially for altcoin trading, it's going to stay pretty Asia focused for a while. But again, like I don't really have any anxiety over like, okay, what happens if, Huobi and OK get shut down? Because it's like, well, people just go trade on like one of the million other exchanges in one of the million other jurisdictions. And I think the people that are really like sort of, doomsday predicting about, oh, what if like every government decides to shut down crypto? It's like, that's a really naive sort of view of how geopolitics work. And I think typically there's actually a lot of push and pull there where it's like, if China decides, they hate Bitcoin, that's a really great reason for the US to start loving Bitcoin. And I think you'll see a lot of that kind of thing where it's like, even just from an economic standpoint, where like smaller countries that are nonetheless, sort of relatively developed, and I guess Malta is a great example.
Malta is, already stepping in.
Yeah. Like they see this as a huge economic opportunity where they can say, okay, well, you guys don't like this stuff, but for us, it's like 5% of our economy now. So, fuck off, basically.
Yeah. With that, kind of, obviously exchanges are going to get shut down, and it's kind of going to just be a leapfrog game. The U.S. now even being looped in with like OFAC countries, it's still kind of strange. But like you said, I don't think it's going to go away. Going into a little bit more on what Arjun was talking about, and also what I've heard as well, there's a lot more optimism still there about tokens though, and token trading, getting a little bit away from Bitcoin trading. Talking about EOS and Tron, I think a lot of that gets discounted, especially out west. People look at Tron, and I think it's just much more Ethereum focused or Ethereum friendly. Is that true? Is what you guys are seeing on the ground there true? Is EOS and Tron actually far more popular there? Do you think it's discounted a little bit too much in the West? Is there still excitement about all these new protocols and building the next protocol, building the new ETH killer? It seems like that's kind of died down here. I still hear that's happening kind of all the time in Asia.
Yeah, so I think I want to explain about like what the actual fundamental mentality is like here, probably in Asia, China, so specifically like China and like Korea. And so like I think like first of all, like here, like the entire community is a highly trading focused and very speculative. And so the mentality is more like a gambling mentality, right? And like the social economic reason for that is, and over past like 20, 30 years, and like the social mobility has been pretty just like, so like has been pretty plateau. And so like all these like middle classes and just like working classes of like Chinese and like Korean. And so they basically have to think about how to climb up this like social ladder, right? Just a social class ladder. And so like they basically consider like crypto as as a potential opportunity, like just for them, like to get rich quickly. And even though they understand a lot of even though they understand a lot of this are just like pure Ponzi scheme or like pure pure pump and dumping, but like I think they still have the hope as, so if I can get in early, I can just get out early as well. So I can be the first, like few thousand like traders out there, like who can make money out of all these like different Ponzi schemes. And so I think like no matter what the concept is, like the concept itself like can be crypto concept, it can be like scalability, it can be privacy, like it can be everything. And just like before cryptocurrency, and like Chinese people has been trading all these like collectibles and all these like antiques. And then so like one thing probably not a lot of people know about is so like before, so I remember like before CZ CZ founded Binance, and then so he was working on something as well, like what we consider as like collectible exchanges, and then so that actually helped a lot. So like that actually helps a lot when it comes to Binance, because like before Binance and many of the other exchanges that don't have a lot of trading pairs, right? So it's only just like Bitcoin. So Bitcoin USD or like Bitcoin renminbi trading pair. So there are maybe just less than 10 trading pairs. So when it comes to all these like collectibles exchanges, and then so you have like tons of like different trading pairs and like SKUs, and so like that's what CZ has been building for, and so that actually help a lot when it comes to Binance, because like Binance is like a crypto to crypto exchanges. So it has like tens of hundreds of different trading pairs. So I think the mentality here is because like cryptocurrency is the easiest way to fundraise and then to pump and dump, and then so so basically people are always talking about, okay, I make 100x on like XYZ, and then so that thing has been, like previously it can be some, like antique collection, like stamp collections, and then like further on to like housing market, and then to probably Chinese A shares. And then so now basically the attention is on cryptocurrency, because it's like that's what can make gambling available for all these Chinese people.
Sure.
So if you ever go to the casino, so in Asia, say for instance like the casino in Macau, and you will experience like completely different vibes than like the casino in Vegas.
I've been
I
once,
think
yeah.
like in Vegas, and people are so just like Vegas, like people are more for fun and then just like relaxing and like things like that. But like if you ever go to the poker room in like Macau, and people are very aggressive and then very aggressive and and then also
Serious
very
almost. No one was really talking.
yeah. So yeah, exactly. So it's a completely different vibe. So
Yeah.
people consider like gambling like just a borderline gambling as one way to make living, and then also as one way to climb up this social class ladder. I think like that's why people just are very enthusiastic about anything that they are able to speculate on.
What's up, guys? Hopefully you're enjoying the conversation at hand. Before we get back to the show, I do have one quick message from my sponsor, Glassnode, who's the most comprehensive on-chain analytics platform out there. Whether you're an institutional investor or an individual investor and you want to understand the new set of fundamentals for this new asset class, do check them out. Glassnode.com. You can look at the active amount of addresses on Ethereum or on Bitcoin. You can look at the amount of volume that was actually transacted on chain. Everything you want to know that's happening on chain that you might not be able to visualize anywhere else. I can't even explain to you guys how cool it is. Check out their studio, glassnode.com. You will not be let down. To understand this new asset class and the fundamentals that are taking place here, the transactions, everything that's going on behind the scenes past just the price and the news, you have to check out glassnode.com. So give them a look. The link's in the bio if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify. One more time, glassnode.com. Thank you guys, and let's get back to the show. Sure. One of the things that you tweeted about recently as well that I found fascinating was I think it was a WeChat message or some like graphic. I don't know if it was intentionally made to mislead, but you were saying that this gets passed around in China or in Asia, and they'll like, once they kind of, even if they know it's fake and it's not even, hitting, I didn't see that unless it was on your feed. Even if they know it's rather misleading, they'll do whatever they can just to mass spam that on WeChat, as opposed to like if you do that here, that's ridiculed pretty hard as that's fake information. You can't spread that. People say FUD all the time. It's almost like that's encouraged there. Like how much fake hype can we generate and play that? And there's not really like a moral hazard there, it seems. Is that somewhat true?
Yeah, so
I think so. Just to clarify, I think like one of the things that drives the difference between the U.S. market and then the Chinese market is that in the U.S. there's some level of like these like what I would call professional traders, but they're not necessarily like from an institutional background or something. They might just be people that got into Bitcoin really early.
Yep.
And they did a lot of self-education and they really understand the fundamentals of, for example, why Bitcoin is valuable. And then that information kind of trickles down to like a massive retail. But retail in the US, at least to some degree, like cares about fundamentals. Whereas in China, there's very few of those people that have kind of like a technical background or a finance background and are kind of leading the retail mass. And so as a result, like a lot of the people that other people in China look to for advice on like what's good are essentially like the masters of pump and dump scams.
Oh, wow.
And so, even from the top down, there's like this huge enthusiasm for these things that we think of as like just totally garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then like so there's like a very just like famous like crypto Chinese term is 价值投资的误区. Basically in like English is the trap of fundamental investment. So basically people consider fundamental investment as a trap, and it is not something to be proud of. And so I think that says a lot of things, and then so there's a lot of this like cultural thing or just like community generated so I would say belief system around like so basically so just like don't hold something forever, and then so you have to swing trade, and because if you swing trade and then so you can make a lot more money than like just like holding on to something. And so like that's why like you will see there's like more trading actions like here in Asia, and then like people tend to trade like many times in a day, like even just for like completely retail investor like knows nothing about crypto, and then so they just really enjoy trading as well. And then also
I guess something I would say that's kind of counterintuitive is that I think actually a lot of the traders in Asia are actually closet Bitcoin maximalists.
I was gonna bring that up. You've said this recently because I understand where you guys are going with this. That's what I've heard. It's a lot more speculative. It's a lot more just kind of throwing money at anything, just kind of looking to gamble. At the same time, you said the stacking sats movement is really picking up speed there, and a lot of people are thinking now in Bitcoin terms, and that's kind of all they're focused on as opposed to.
And that's been true. I mean, they don't. The thing is, like, if you're someone that's at the top of like a huge community of pump and dump people, you're not going to talk about like, man, all this other stuff is garbage. I just want to get Bitcoin.
It destroys
People are talking about that, but like there's this great concept in behavioral economics, like expressed preferences versus revealed preferences.
Sure.
And like people's revealed preferences are obviously towards holding Bitcoin, and there's very few other coins. There's a few things that are also seen as valuable. A few altcoins that I think are actually good, but for the most part, I think most of these people are doing these this trading in order to accumulate more Bitcoin.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Switching on, we could talk about the Asian and U.S. Differences all day. I think that's a fascinating topic. I appreciate the insights. I know a lot of the listeners will as well. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, or one of the next things I want to talk about was, just so we don't spend the full time on Asia, is Satoshis Treasure. I have to bring this up. When I first heard about it, kind of taking one step back, I saw Ready Player One. I was late to see Ready Player One. I think I was like a month or two behind everyone. Everyone was freaking out. I knew I wanted to see it, and I just waited. I don't know why. But right after that, I made a tweet about it, and people were saying, how insane is this going to be in a year or two when, we can actually play this VR game, or you can go in there and it's going to work on Ethereum and all this. And I was like, I don't know how that works. Now seeing this, it's not like Ready Player One can happen in 3. This is real life Ready Player One when you look at Satoshi's Treasure. What is Satoshi's Treasure for anyone that's unfamiliar? And then what's the origin there? How'd you come up with this?
So the background is that I've been really into these games called alternate reality games for a long time. And so there was a craze for these in the early 2000s. They were mostly like marketing. A really cool one called I Love Bees. Actually, the 9 Inch Nails did a really great one called Year Zero. And there were these games where like they had some puzzles involved, and then there were like some real life elements, and potentially there was a prize, but sometimes it wasn't a prize. It was just like sort of you would have figured out what the ending was. And like the 9 Inch Nails one had some pretty amazing events. Like there was some like underground event where they actually put on a conference for like, or not they put on like a concert for like 200 people that like fake riot cops busted up at the end. Like it was these really immersive and like cool experiences. And then there was this other one that I wouldn't necessarily even put in the ARG bucket. It was called Cicada 3301. And it was this really mysterious series of extremely difficult puzzles. And it was the storyline was pretty sparse behind it, but the idea was that it was a recruiting mechanism for this like shadowy group that was trying to uncover a bunch of really intelligent people. And if you could, get far enough in the game, you could join the group. And there were like rumors that it was an NSA recruitment vehicle. Someone that I know who was at the NSA for a while said it wasn't. But yeah, so I always thought these were really fun. And I always thought it'd be really cool to do one with Bitcoin where like, you'd solve all these hard puzzles and there'd be a Bitcoin prize. But I couldn't figure out sort of what the cryptographic basis for that would be. And so I kind of tabled the idea. And then when Dovey and I were looking at cold storage strategies, we happened upon this thing called Shamir secret sharing. And so that comes from this dude, Adi Shamir. So if you're familiar with like RSA encryption, he's the S in RSA. And he's his work has touched like every aspect of cryptography. But one of the things he made was this really nice algorithm that allows you to take any strings, so like any series of letters and numbers, and then split it up into a bunch of shares and specify a threshold number of those shares that have to be put back together in order to restore the original secret. And so when I saw this, I had this like flash where I was like, oh man, like, okay, now you can do this Bitcoin game, because how it works is you have all these puzzles and then you have these shares, which we're calling keys. And if you can find, say, like 400 out of 1,000 keys, that's like what we're doing for this game, then you can take a Bitcoin private key. And so initially I was like, maybe Dovey and I will just like fund this ourselves. And then like every friend that I told about this was like, dude, like we want to invest in this. We want to like do this. So I'm like, okay. So we ended up like raising this small round from like Naval Ravikant and Balaji Srinivasan and Kindred Ventures and a bunch of other really badass people. We're fellows on, I don't want to leave people, Mark Pincus, like just amazing, amazing folks. And we got this game started, and we've been shocked by two things. One is like, we launched with this super bare bones MVP. So it's like this, old school kind of like ASCII site. There's no app. There's no like way to store the keys other than just storing them on your computer. And I expected it would be like a small community of geeks that would start playing it. And then as we developed tools to make it easier, more people would play. But what's actually happened is like on day one, we had, 10, 20,000 users. The user growth has just not stopped. I think we're 70,000, something like that now. And it's still growing. And people have formed these clans to play, because like the skill set required for different clues is really different. And so you need kind of a diverse group of people to be able to play it. And I recruited this really awesome team to help us build it. So this, a designer that I've been wanting to work with forever, some really awesome, super talented app developers, a really amazing ops person, really amazing BD person. And we've just kind of been expanding it ever since then. And now we're kind of at this stage where, the clue generation has slowed down a little bit because we're working on these really, really big, really interesting clues. And then over the next few weeks, we're going to be releasing those, and it's going to be insane. I mean, and also what's cool about this is it's gotten so many other people excited that all of these friends I have in the crypto community are coming forward and saying like, hey, I have this awesome idea for a clue. Or like, we want to put up some extra Bitcoin to do like this side hunt or this mini game. And like these ideas are just incredibly, incredibly cool. And so I think, for us, it's been one of the most fun things. It kind of feels to me like sort of a relic from the old school days of Bitcoin before all these like finance bros came in and made it all about money. And it's been really great to like bring that back. And I actually have a hard time sort of not spending too much time on Satoshis Treasure just because it's so exciting and so fun for me.
It's wild. It's one of those things when you start talking about clans, you honestly can't tell whether at some point it's like, are you taking ideas from Ready Player One? Or do they take the ideas from you? Because almost every single piece of you're looking for a certain amount of keys, and if you collect this amount of keys, you get this $1 million prize at the end. It's just insane. And I did not know there's 20,000 users, or $20,000 or 20,000 users at the beginning. Now 70,000, you said 100,000.
I think we're in the 70s. I haven't looked at the database for a bit.
Wow.
And that's actually without, like, we haven't really done anything to sort of increase growth. And so one of the things, like, I've really enjoyed talking to Mark Pincus, who's the founder of Zynga, as one of our investors, just about sort of, because he like at Zynga, with Farmville, they sort of invented a lot of these like viral loops. And his take on sort of how you grow in a world where like viral loops are so played out has been really interesting. And it's been really fun for us to think about, like, how do we kick this game into sort of hyper growth mode without making it annoying for users, without sort of, doing all the annoying things that like viral apps do to make themselves go more viral. Yeah. We have a lot of interesting stuff kind of coming on that front.
Cool. Any hints being told today? I know you guys, I think we're giving hints on your business cards. Are there any dropping in the podcast?
Well, no, I mean, so yeah, our business cards actually are a key. So we have, Dovey has an honorary one as a member of Primitive, and then the rest of them, each of us have these like really cool custom laser cut business cards that actually have a QR code on them. You have to do something special to the cards that I won't reveal to reveal the QR code. But if you can get the entire team, then it's actually a mini Shamir split. So it's like I think it's 6 of 6, 5 of 5 split. And if you reassemble that, you actually get a key. So if you see us, like, just ask us for a card. It's funny. People who are playing the game have met me in real life, and then like 10 minutes later texted me like, I forgot to ask you for a card. So we won't give you one unless you ask for one. But all you got to do is ask, and you'll get a card. And then there's some other clues that are kind of hiding out there in the world. Not all the clues are on the website. There's some clues that have been released in other places. And there's been this really funny phenomenon where like a couple of the clues have been really, really hard, and people have messaged us being like, no one has solved this. And I'm like, actually, like, they totally did. I mean, because we have Google Analytics, so I can tell when someone solved it. So even the really hard ones are getting solved. And sometimes the way people are solving them, I mean, is blowing my mind. Like, I think actually, like, I might end up monetizing this game just by sending job offers to the best hackers in the game, because like the people that are really good at playing our game are like unbelievably impressive. I mean, so there's this guy who messaged me, and he was like, he couldn't figure out how to solve this one clue. There's this clue that involves like a series of numbers, and you essentially have to understand sort of what numbers come next in the series, and he couldn't figure it out. And he's like, but maybe I can just like use Twitter's API to find all the tweets, like the millions of tweets that were released over the past couple hours, and I can figure out the clue that way. And he ends up finding a live exploit in Twitter's API. So he literally, like, from one standpoint, he literally hacks Twitter to solve this clue. And then messages me and is like, yeah, I just applied to Twitter for like a bug bounty for having hacked this clue. And he solved it that way. I mean, this guy really did it. So it's like the sort of the talent of hunters is both the bane of my existence, because it means I have to think of really, really hard clues to beat them. And is also something I'm just like super excited and kind of delighted by. Like, it's so cool to see these super smart people playing the game.
That's wild. That is absolutely insane. Are all the clues up on the website? I can, for everyone that's watching on YouTube, I'm going to pop it up here. Is all the clues on satoshitreasure.xyz, or do you and Dovey tweet them out?
Yeah. So the clues are on the website. If you want to get notified, you can just like sign up at the bottom.
Okay.
You can provide an email. You can provide a burner email if you don't want to give us your real one. You can provide a phone number if you want to get like text messages really quickly when the clues come out. And then there's some clues that are not on the website. So like, in the past we've sent out clues over the Blockstream satellite.
I saw one of those.
Yeah, and so clues that don't come from the website will always be signed by our PGP key, and that PGP key is available on Keybase. So if you go to like Satoshis Treasure, which is our official Twitter, you can see our PGP fingerprint, and that's to prevent people from releasing like fake clues that might send people to some dangerous location or something. Yeah. So if you see something in the real world that you think might be a clue, you want to make sure that it's actually signed by us. But yeah, there's some clues that are out there just kind of floating around.
That's insane. Are you able to see what team is in the lead? And I know you guys, the really cool part about this, at least when I read through it, my understanding is it's not really up to you. I mean, if someone gets all the keys or all the shares, you guys don't have to okay it. They just claim the coins.
Exactly.
Like, so
that's like a super important part of the game from a regulatory perspective, from like a gameplay perspective, just from the perspective.
And from a trust perspective from the players as well. Yeah.
From making something cool in crypto. I mean, so yeah, like, if anyone finds 400 of these keys, they'll just win. And that might be a public team. I think what a lot of people don't realize is like, there's a lot of these really big public teams that are doing really well. But there's also a lot of teams that are like 5 or 6 super smart people that never talk to anyone.
I can imagine. Yeah.
There's like this iceberg of like the teams you can see. And then below that, there's like all these other like very elite clans that no one knows about. So I think it's possible. And, frankly, it wouldn't be my preferred outcome, but I think it's possible that like, on some day the Bitcoin just is gone, like someone just wins and like we don't even know who it was. I think that could happen. Although, some of these clues, there's a pretty big advantage to having a large clan. So like one of the clues we're running right now that I think is really fun, that one of the people on my team came up with, is like we're having people construct these like human blockchains on Twitter. And so how it works is like you take a video of yourself doing like your clan's gesture, and then someone else has to hold a phone of your video while they do the same gesture, and then like tweet that out, and it makes these long chains. And like whoever has the longest chain is going to get a key.
Oh, wow.
I think we're going to try to do like, we're really focusing hard on having a mix of clues that you have to be like a world-class cryptographer to beat, and then also clues that like really anyone can do, that are like nonetheless very hard, that require a lot of work, but like that you don't have to have any specific programming skills to beat.
Very, very cool. For anyone that wants that info, like I said, the link's going to be, I'm going to post it up right here. If you're listening to this on iTunes or anywhere else, send the audio, just go to my page or go to Satoshi Treasure. You will be able to find it. we hit definitely all the Asia insights. I mean, we could dive into a million more of those. I obviously wanted to touch on Satoshi's Treasure. I think it's fascinating what you guys are doing there. And plus, like you said, it opens up the opportunity for so many more incentive games and kind of incentivizing teams a certain way and a trustless way for them to be rewarded.
There's going to be a lot of really fun mini games coming. I mean, the guys
Yeah.
like Matt Longo from Keep called me last night and told me this idea that is like so awesome. It's going to be such a hilarious mini game, and it's like a chance for people to get extra Bitcoin. So yeah,
can we get a hint, or is it's under wraps? It can be under wraps.
No, it's not too under wraps. I can talk about this a little bit. I mean, so we're basically going to make a game where, and I can't describe the mechanic yet, but I can describe how the game's going to work. You're going to have to go find people that did specific things on chain. So it's like, go find the DAO hacker and get him to move like 1 ETH for you. Go find, someone that invested in this specific ICO and, get them to prove that on chain. So almost like a scavenger hunt for actual on-chain stuff. And we have a really interesting technical way to do that. I think that's just going to be super fun and then just a hilarious sort of social activity.
Yeah. For sure. Well, if it's anything like Satoshi's Treasure, I'm sure it'll take off pretty quick, especially with a money prize like we have here.
Yeah. Actually, I have to run early because I have another call.
I was about to wrap this up. You have one more minute. Okay. Does that work out? All right, cool. I was going to say thank you guys a ton for coming on. If I did have to leave you with one final question, Eric, you write proof of work every single day or every single week, and Dovey, you're always kind of looking at trends. I think you were talking about Tether this morning. You were talking about Leo yesterday. If there was one project outside of Bitcoin, I know you guys both understand and appreciate the importance of Bitcoin, but if there was one project that's intriguing to you right now, not even from kind of an investment standpoint, but what's kind of the one topic you would say is most interesting? Asia-based, US-based, wherever.
Yeah. I'll take that first just because I got to run and then Dovey can to take a second. But I think for me, the two projects I'm most excited about, the general area is privacy, right? I think that's something that I've done a lot of research sort of into, like, is Bitcoin going to be a compelling privacy coin over the next, say, 5 years? And I think the answer is actually no.
Wow.
The trade-offs that you have to make to get really, really good privacy on Bitcoin are not conservative enough for the Bitcoin core maintainers to want to do. And I think they're right about that. I think, like, for Bitcoin's sake, it's not worth that trade-off. On the other hand, I think like privacy coins are super compelling from a use case perspective. And the one that I'm most excited about is probably mobile coin. It's these guys, really, really badass team. They're going to work with Signal to get this thing integrated into Signal Messenger. And I think the compatibility there of like a hyper private messenger with a privacy coin is going to be super interesting. And then the other one that I've been super hyped about is Handshake. And I think the reason for that is twofold, right? So like one is that if you think about digital assets, like the most valuable digital asset in the world is actually still domain names. The aggregate market cap of all domain names is still actually in excess of the market cap of all crypto. And so if Handshake can capture some small amount of that, because if you think about it, like names themselves are like naturally scarce, right? So like Bitcoin is artificially scarce, and that artificial scarcity is like very, very believable as the result of like Bitcoin holders being super rigid about never inflating Bitcoin.
Yep.
Names are like naturally scarce. Like there's a limited number of words in a language that you actually want to use as a domain name. And I think that makes Handshake super interesting. And then on the other hand, it's like I grew up during the age of the internet when the internet was this like really open and sort of free thing. And it's morphed into this like walled garden approach of like Twitter and Facebook and everything. And so I see Handshake as like one part of a stack where you have like decentralized storage, decentralized transport, and decentralized namespace, where I think we can come back to these like highly uncensorable websites. And I think that's going to be super interesting and awesome. I'm really excited for it.
Cool. Eric, thank you very much for your time coming on. I'll wrap up with Dovey in a second.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I got to run early.
No, it's all good, man. Cheers.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yep, peace. And then Dovey, what do you think? You were talking about Tether earlier. There's so much talk about whether or not the Leo is going to be the next big thing, and people are comparing it to BNB and so many different things that you cover. What would you, if you have to pick one or two?
Yeah, so I think that all these exchange tokens, and so I think so it gets like good enough attention right now, like in our Western community, but it's actually like it's actually the same old thing that like all the way from BNB and then like HT and OKB, and then so they all issue their own exchange token. So It's like so I would consider them as like a borderline security, like to be honest, and so as like orthogonal angle, like towards like what Bitcoin is considered as like a sound money, and because I for like things like BNB and like Leo and as well as like many other many other exchange tokens out there, and they basically stay vibrant as well as they basically stay vibrant as long as the exchange is as long as the exchange is vibrant, right? So that's actually very different comparing with any like native cryptocurrency. And I think we will see more and more such like asset-backed type of like token out there, and then so what I consider as like a productive asset. And because of Bitcoin and many other like native cryptocurrencies, so they are not productive assets. And then like other than that, I think a lot of Western people don't know is, and I think like right now in like Asia, so like there are probably 20 new exchanges out there, and then so they've got like decent volume, and like BK is one of them, and so they have their own exchange token BKK, and so that's something that I will always like keep an eye on, because like the most profitable business right now in like the most profitable crypto business like has to be exchanges, and like and I think it's even more profitable than like any of these like ASIC maker, because when it comes to ASIC or minor manufacturer, is very capex heavy, right? But like exchanges is just always just OPEX, and so it's a pretty very light business, but it's highly profitable. And then other than that, and me and Eric, and we are very interested about is there any other alternative type of like resources like can be the fundamental it will be the fundamental consensus layer. Like right now POW is heavily depending on like hash rate, so like that's basically depending on computation power, and like we are very enthusiastic about anything based on storage. And so like things like Space Mesh, like Space Mesh is one of my earliest investment, and it's basically like a storage. So it's a storage based one. Because when you think about that, like storage is also like an alternative or like a mutation version of the proof of work, right? But like it has a much better accessibility for like, all the retail investor, and then also is like by nature anti-ASIC. So like that's one thing that we are very interested about, and we have been looking into things like Space Mesh and Chia and like a few other storage-based like projects out there. And I would say that's like the second like sound money layer thing that we are currently looking at.
Okay, cool. I always like to hear new themes or new perspectives, especially from your guys' team. When you're kind of anti-thesis, it's cool to. I know you're kind of willing to kind of go whatever's interesting, whether it's next week, whether it's a new team, whatever it is. So I think that's a pretty interesting take. Dovey, thank you so much for coming on. I already told Eric, I really appreciate both of you guys making the time. I wanted to dive in a ton in kind of the difference with the Asia and the US, and hopefully we covered a good amount of that. For everyone that's listening, follow these guys on Twitter. Eric and Dovey both are put out insight that I don't think you can get anywhere else. I think some people's information is very repeatable, but I think you guys both have some pretty unique perspectives and insights in that regards. And then also proof of work, I think you contribute to that sometimes as well. You might have a slice in there, but is Eric's newsletter, which is incredible. You can keep up with Bitcoin. You can keep up with, I always see Decred in there. You can keep up with a ton of different things and little insights from projects. Very clean, concise, no noise. It's a very simple way to keep up with what's going on. And that's all I got. And also check out Satoshis Treasure. Thank you so much for coming on, Dovey. This was fun.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Luke.